everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Movie Crusaders. My name's Sean Wasserkrug, and today we're going to be reviewing one of the most anticipated films of 2021, Denis Villeneuve's Dune. Now, for me, I went into this with relatively no information. A lot of people have read Frank Herbert's sci-fi, classic book Dune. Some people have seen the 1984 version of Dune, which only thing I've ever really heard about that version of Dune is that it's dreadfully boring and dull. But one thing I heard most about Dune is that it is a book that could never work in a film. Which, many people said that about the Lord of the Rings, but look where we're at now with Lord of the Rings. I did my best to go into this as blind as possible, which some people say is a mistake. Some people say you should read the book before you watch the film so you kind of know the world building because you just don't have enough time to do it. But I did not do that. I went into Dune with literally no prior knowledge to the film whatsoever. I never even saw the 1984 version of Dune. All I know is from the trailers and the cast, and kind of just going to jump in from there. Now, for me, with Denis Villeneuve, I know he's one of the most beloved directors going today. Me, personally, I think he's a fine director. I don't love all of his films like everyone else does. I think Prisoners is a fantastic film. I think Blade Runner 2049 looks phenomenal, but is a little boring of a film. I wasn't super crazy about Sicario. Arrival, I just don't get why it was so beloved as it was. I honestly was quite bored with Arrival. But one thing that I can say about Denis Villeneuve is he knows how to make his films look breathtaking. And even with those films, even while I wasn't a big fan of those films, you cannot deny how gorgeous these films look. And even from the trailers of Dune, that was definitely one thing that you could see right from the get-go, was that this film was going to feel like a larger-than-life experience, especially if you had IMAX or something like that near you, which sadly I did not, so I stayed home and watched it on my 4K TV on HBO Max. The big thing with Dune, besides the huge cast of big-name actors, is that, yes, this film is a lot of story. I would say for this 2.5-hour film, which only takes the first 50% of the book, which is from what I heard. It's basically this is part one of 2 to maybe even 3 films, and this movie is basically the first half of the book. But for the first 20 minutes to almost the first hour, as I was watching this film, I kind of felt like I needed a study guide. Because it's not that they aren't doing a good job of explaining things, because they're explaining things literally from first image of this film all the way through. They are just dropping so much stuff that I felt like I needed to start writing everything down, because I felt like I was forgetting things, and there was just too much stuff being thrown at me that I was having a hard time deciphering who was who. This family belongs to this people, and these people are this people, that I just felt like I wasn't going to really understand the story very well. But once we get to about the halfway point of the film, and I start to, figure out these characters and who everyone is and how their characters are to act, it all started to make more sense to me, and the plot and the story and the world building all seemed to kind of fall into place for me. So for anyone who's watching this, who is like me, who has no prior knowledge to Dune, the first 20 minutes to an hour is going to feel like a lot. A study guide would be lovely, but you shouldn't need a study guide to watch a movie. The world should be built for you via the directors. I mean, is it as good as how Lord of the Rings did it, when the first 10 minutes they basically dropped the entire premise of Lord of the Rings to you? No, it's not going to do that. But I think by the time you get to the halfway point of the film, you're either going to be on board and kind of get the gist of what's going on, or you're just going to be watching it and not really knowing what's happening. And I think that's where a lot of the kind of middle ground is when it comes to people who are watching Dune. You're either going to know the story and you're going to dive right in and sink your teeth into it and you're going to love it, or you're not going to know the story and you're either going to learn and grow with it as it's moving, or you're just going to fight against it and just think this is a dull, boring film that was basically 2.5 hours of nothing. I didn't feel that way. Like I said, the first 20 minutes to an hour, I was just like, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, but I'm going to give it my best shot because I want to see how this film works. And a reason why this film works so well, to my opinion, is definitely the cast. Timothée Chalamet, love him or hate him, he definitely is doing a very solid job as Paul Atreides. And bear in mind, I'm going to say a lot of words and names in this film. I'm probably going to butcher them because I don't know the world, like, Star Wars and stuff like that. So if I say I'm wrong, I apologize. But Timothée Chalamet plays Paul Atreides, who's kind of like the Luke Skywalker of the story. And I'm going to use some Star Wars verbiage because this definitely feels, and I'll take this from the Real Rejects, this is basically kind of like Star Wars meets Game of Thrones, in a sense. So if you like those two things, Dune might be right up your alley. But Chalamet plays kind of like the Luke Skywalker film of the role. He plays Paul, who's basically this, he's the son of the Duke, Duke Leto Atreides, played by Oscar Isaac. And there's this kind of under the ground story element going on with Paul, where he might have this ability or this kind of messiah storyline going on with him, that he might be the one, which, yes, we've seen this story many, many times before in many other sci-fi films. But I don't think that they go too far with it to the point where you're like, oh my god, like, stop with this. And I think that's also largely done by the cast. Timothée Chalamet has to do so much, but having to show so little. He has to show so much emotion without expressing the emotion, if that makes any sense. And I think Chalamet does a very solid job of trying to hold back everything that's happening to him, except for when he can't anymore and it just kind of busts out of him, which I think he does a great job of doing that as Paul. Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica Atreides. She's one of the highlights of the film. I love Rebecca Ferguson. Everything she's in, to me, she just knocks it out of the park. Her character is very intriguing because she's the mother of Paul, but she's not married to the Duke, and she's a part of this coven or group called the Bene Gesserit, I don't know. But basically, it's kind of a member, all-female member mystic order, kind of like the Jedi, where they have powers and abilities, mainly Jedi mind tricks, where they can change their vocal tones, and it can kind of take control and make you do things you don't want to do. But there's this whole underlining story with them, and she's a part of it, but she's kind of the one that's going against the norm because she was supposed to bear a daughter, and instead she bore Timothée Chalamet, a boy. But she is, to me, the heart of this film. She's the one who has to kind of bear all the weight of what's going on in this film, and Rebecca Ferguson does a fantastic job of it. For anyone who's a fan of Zendaya, who plays, I think it's Shani, she's not in the movie a whole lot. She's in it maybe a total of 10 minutes. She's basically Paul's dream girl, and when I say dream girl, I mean she's a girl who constantly keeps showing up in his dreams. She's not in a movie a whole lot. She's definitely going to be made, she's definitely a character that's for, like, the sequels. So if you're expecting a lot of Zendaya in this film, you're going to be greatly disappointed. When she is in the film, she's decent, but she's part of this other group called the Fremen, which is basically these group of people who live on the planet Dune, or Arrakis, I think is what or Arrakis, I think is what the planet is actually called, like sand people. Basically, they have blue eyes because of the world that they live on, and they're led by Stilgar, who's played by Javier Bardem, who's also solid in his role. Oscar Isaac's Duke Atreides, him and Paul and Lady Jessica, they are basically in charge of the house of Atreides. The other house would be the house of Harkonnen, which is kind of the bad guy group, which is led by Stellan Skarsgård, who plays the Baron, who looks super menacing and villainous in this role. Stellan Skarsgård looks awesome in this film. Definitely the villain of the story, along with Dave Bautista, who plays Rabin Harkonnen. I think I'm saying that name right. He's the nephew. I feel like I'm kind of all over the place on this review, but there's just so much to Dune. To me, my favorite characters of this story that we got to see are Josh Brolin's Gurney Halleck, who kind of plays the bodyguard slash kind of Obi-Wan Kenobi to Paul in terms of training him and getting him prepared. He's playing kind of a hard-ass character who never smiles, who's literally willing to die to protect Duke Leto, and then basically trying to prepare Paul to take over for when the day comes for him to become the Duke. And I really like Josh Brolin's performance in there. And of course, I think this is going to be the number one favorite performance for most people. It's going to be Jason Momoa's Duncan Idaho, who's basically playing Aquaman. I mean, Jason Momoa is just such a cool guy, and he's such a fun presence, and his charisma and basically his chemistry with Timothy Chalamet's Paul works wonders. He kind of acts like the big brother to Paul, and he gets to do a lot of the fun action sequences and fight sequences, and Jason Momoa does a great job in the role. Every time he's on screen, I immediately become excited and invested because he's so much fun to watch, and he brings most of the action in the film. So whenever Duncan Idaho's on screen, you know something good's about to happen. In terms of the rest of the cast, you've got Charlotte Rampling, who plays, I think she's the lead witch of the Bene Gesserit. Chen Chang plays Dr. Wellington Yu, who's basically the doctor for the Atreides. You also got Stephen McKinley Henderson, who plays Thurfer Hawat, which is like the security officer for Duke Leto. David Dastmalchian, I never can say his last name. He plays kind of, once again, the advisor to the Baron, which everyone will know him as Polka Dot Man from this year's Suicide Squad, among other things. The cast all do a great job. Oscar Isaac, I think, does a fantastic job as Duke Leto. Like I said, I already said great things about Chalamet and Ferguson. Stellan Skarsgård looks great. Brolin. The whole cast is great. No one brings a bad performance to this. Denis Villeneuve just has a huge undertaking to do with this film because there is so much to learn and understand with these worlds and these families, because basically the main overall arcing plot is House Atreides has to go to this world, Acreus or Acris, or however the hell you want to say it, and basically it's a inhospitable desert planet, kind of like Tatooine, and they need to basically recover and basically gather this stuff called spice, which is basically used to help humans do interstellar travel and all this kind of stuff. They got to kind of harvest it and store it and stuff like that. But they're at war with the Harkonnen, and it's a whole lot of stuff. And barring the first 20 minutes to an hour, they're doing a decent job of trying to explain all that to you before they really kind of delve into the Dune story. Denis Villeneuve makes everything look phenomenal. This is easily one of the most gorgeous looking films in 2021, or even maybe of 2022. You really feel a part of this world. The visualizations, they have these shields called Holtzman shields, where it's kind of like a blue orb around them that can help them withstand bullets and stuff like that, and you can only kind of break through with sharp objects such as like knives. They're X-wing kind of fighter pilot ships. They're called ornithopters, which look like dragonflies. Every time they are used in the film, I love these like little fighter pilot ships. They're fun to watch. They look great, and of course you got the sandworms, which that's the only thing I really knew about Dune, the 1984 film, is that there's these big sandworms. And when you do get to see these worms, they are larger than life. Hans Zimmer does a great score for the film as well. And it's just a lot in this film. It's a very, very, very dense film. And depending on how you take the film and how alert you are to it and how much you want to be a part of this world and learn this world, like a lot of us were with Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and Game of Thrones, will greatly depend on how much you like this film. A lot of the characters are basically kind of not necessarily in an idle waiting to see where we get to, but this is only the first half of the story. So there's a lot of story that we still haven't gotten yet from these characters, and a lot of them are kind of idle through this film, because you know that they have, like Zendaya, for example, because you know there's going to be so much more to their characters in the future films or film. And so it can be frustrating for someone who's wanting so much more to happen in this that aren't going to greatly get that. This is a film that is building a world and building a story. but you're only going to get the first half of the story by the end credits for Dune. So it can be kind of frustrating that when it ends, it just kind of ends. There's no like big awesome final battle sequence or anything like that, like in Fellowship or New Hope or anything like that. It just kind of ends, and you're kind of left waiting for, you know, however long it's going to be before Dune 2 comes out. But after 2.5 hours, I was invested enough to say I can't wait to see what the sequel brings, because I want to see where the story goes with Paul and Lady Jessica and the rest of the cast. And ultimately, that's what you need with Dune, is by the end of this 2.5 hour runtime, are you invested? Do you want to see the sequel? Do you want to continue to see the story of all these characters that you spent 2.5 hours with? And for me, the answer is yes. It's not going to be like that for a lot of people. A lot of people might find this story boring and uneventful and stuff like that. And yes, granted, the first 20 minutes to an hour, it does feel that way. But in the last hour, hour and a half, for me, the film started to make me care about the characters and the story, and by the end credits, I was invested with the film overall. And I think Denis Villeneuve does a very solid job of bringing the world of Dune to life for a lot of people. Yes, could we have had like a study guide to kind of go, you're in this category, you're in this category? Sure. But by the end of the film, I have a pretty good understanding of where everyone is, where they're supposed to be, and the world that we are, at least for the first film, know where the world is of Dune. So in terms of recommendations, if you're willing and you're open to learning about a whole brand new world of families and characters and stuff like that, then I strongly recommend Dune. It is definitely one of the most gorgeous films. It's incredibly well acted by the entire cast. The action sequences that we do get are very, very well done, especially with Jason Momoa's Duncan, Idaho. And like I said, it's a very, very interesting film, but a very dense one at that. So if you can see this in IMAX, definitely see it in IMAX. If you can see it in theaters, go ahead. Or like I said, it's on HBO Max right now in 4K if you have a 4K TV. Either way, I strongly recommend checking out Dune. I think it'll definitely be worth the visit and worth the journey, and I cannot wait to see what Denis Villeneuve does with the second film. Going to my overall score, just because that first 20 minutes to an hour is so dense that you can kind of shut it off and leave it and never come back to it, I'm going to give Dune an 87%. Everything else about the film I love. It's just that first 20 minutes to an hour is kind of a make or break moment for a lot of people, and some people are going to break and not stay with it. So an 87% for me. Definitely a strong recommendation. Definitely give it a watch if you're ready to learn about a brand new world. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you guys did, go ahead and give this a like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos pop up on the Movie Crusaders. Of course, don't forget to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Coming up next, I got a review for The Last Duel. And next week, we've got Last Night in Soho, which is one of my most anticipated films of the year as well. And of course, Brian Michaels and myself will be back once again for 5 more movies to talk about during that weekend movie history in the Weekend Crusaders. Our episode for this week dropped today, so check out that as well. And until next time, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.